welcome back to the Coffee Break Podcast. As you know, bullying and incivility happen because they can. And it takes dedicated leaders like all of you who are willing to do something about it. However, that requires you to really be in a good space, like mentally, physically, emotionally. And that's what we're going to talk about today with our guest, Daniel Hudson, the VP and Associate Chief Nursing Executive of Operations at Jefferson Health in Philadelphia, PA, my home state, who will share his recommendations for how leaders can truly care and lead with purpose. So, Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Renee. Really happy to be here and to share my experiences with you.
Well, I am excited not only for our listeners, but for myself, okay? Because Daniel and I met really not too long ago when I've been doing some work with Jefferson Health, and there was an opportunity to do a little bit more work. And actually, Daniel and I met, and I'll just say it was kind of a sales call. He's like, hey, we're interested in having you do some work. So we had that conversation, but then Daniel and I talked about a model that he's using. And that was the whole call really, is to talk about his really ideas on how to have this life that's built on harmony and not just balance. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, but a little bit more about Daniel. He's been practicing nursing for close to 30 years. He's led workforce strategies in both urban and rural communities. And while most of his work is focused on operations, he is truly passionate about harmonizing one's purpose in all aspects of life, because you really can't create a healthy work culture if you're not a healthy leader. And Daniel, where I want to start with you is this whole notion of, work-life balance. And you have a different approach to it. It's not really balance, it's about harmony. So can you share with us, your take on that?
Yeah, I will. And just funny thing here real quick. I think it's the harmony that's got me to age so well. Not 30 years of nursing,
20.
just 20 years.
Thanks.
But I don't think I'm focusing on the physical aspect. Yeah. So when we got to talking, Renee, and I got to share my story about harmony versus balance and this kind of model, in all transparency, this is kind of a model I've been applying for myself for years and years and years as a nurse leader, and it continues to evolve. So it's in draft phase still, and I'm excited to be able to share a little bit about it. And the piece about harmony versus balance, I think, is just so critical to this model. It's been critical for me. It was like I had a breakthrough in my mind and understanding. And the reason that I personally don't like the word balance is because I picture like a seesaw. And if you got two people on a seesaw, right, they're both fighting to try to get their balance and to get to the, up and down and up and down. And so it's this constant struggle between who's up, who's down. And then maybe even like who's on that balance beam and how are we standing straight. And I found personally in the four kind of key areas or buckets of life that I've kind of created, that it was impossible to balance the four buckets. It was setting up expectations that were just they were insurmountable. And so I transitioned from this idea of balance to harmony. And the idea around harmony really is around the concept of, I know I'm going to have to spend 10 extra hours at work this week. So how am I going to harmonize that back to one of the other buckets the next week or the week after, instead of trying to say, oh my gosh, I've got 10 hours. Let me balance that and try to go, do my typical thing with my family where we eat dinner around a table, as an example. And so when I harmonize that and I set that expectation for myself, and maybe even have a conversation with my wife or my family or another coworker about that harmonization, we're all setting up the right expectations. And so this could extend even beyond your own personal struggle that you might have. And it might even set expectations for other people you work with, other people that are in your community, your family, and we'll get to those buckets. But that's a little bit about the difference between harmony versus the
Well, and
balance.
we've talked a lot about employee well-being, okay? And especially over the last
Mhm.
4 years, it's really top of mind for a lot of leaders. But only recently, I
Yeah.
think we've been hearing more about leader well-being and that whole,
Yes.
you talk about balance. Where's the balance when you're in the middle of a global pandemic, And even beyond
Mhm.
that, it's not just situational. We all go through struggles in different seasons of our lives where we feel off balance, but I love your approach.
Yes.
It's not being maybe off balance. Maybe it's a season of your life, or maybe it's this week or this month, you have a lot of extra, constraints or expectations put upon you. But how do you then, I love this shift to the, you know, cons- consider harmonizing, not balancing. And so, yeah, I think communicating too, like this is going to be a really busy week for me at work. So even
Yes.
though we eat together as a family every day, Thursday, I'm not going to be able to do that. And
That's
be
right.
conscious about that. And again, communicate it. Because I think by doing that, then you don't feel like, I don't know, Daniel, there are times where I set myself up, I'm going to get all these things done, and then I don't, and I feel like a failure. And I'm sure you've seen
Right.
this too, but
Yes. Yeah. And picture this. I'm a very visual person. And so we'll get
yeah,
into these buckets here in a second. But let's just say you have 5 buckets, right? So to get to 100%, you need to be putting 20% into every bucket all the time and balancing that. Is that really
no.
attainable? No, right? It's not attainable. So you're just setting yourself up for failure. You're setting other people's expectations up for failure. So I truly believe with all my heart the shift to harmony is just
Yes.
critical.
And before we get into the buckets, I want to find out I don't know, what happened that made you sit down one day and say, okay, I need to harmonize a little bit. I'm going to come up with these
Yes.
buckets and this motto. So I want you to tell the story before you actually tell us what they are. So listeners, I know you're like, what are the buckets? What are the buckets? But just hang on.
Yes.
I want
Yes.
to I want to know how this all came about.
So that's a great question. About, we'll say 10 to 12 years ago, and I had the opportunity to participate in a professional development opportunity when I was at the University of Vermont Medical Center. And it was facilitated by the Center for Creative Leadership. And they had a model that they used as we went through this 1 week program. And as they were sharing their model, it dawned on me that they were talking about this idea. They had an exercise we had to write down, and they said, okay, there's these. They have their buckets, and they're like, write down the percentages that over the last 3 weeks that you've spent in these buckets. And as I was writing those down, and I looked at them because I'm very visual, I just had this epiphany. I'm like, I'm not balancing
Right.
anything at all. And this was pre-COVID, right? Because I talked about 10 to 12 years ago. And so, well, life's hard, work's hard. It's not easy. We're on a journey. We're always growing and learning. Um, so it's not like at that time I was struggling as a leader or anything along those lines. I just had an epiphany, like, wow, I need to think about this
Right.
differently. And I think that's how a lot of us grow and learn, right? We have a moment. It's just a light bulb goes off in our head. And it's from that light bulb now for 10 years. I've been evolving and growing this idea and this concept. And interestingly enough, I've even kind of changed the name of the bucket over time, or I've changed the priority of which bucket I think is more important over time. And so we can talk about all that and that kind of my journey through these buckets. But that's where it all
Wow.
started.
And you and I are very similar. And I'm sure a lot of people who are listening have also had these experiences where you read something and it resonates with you, like in your core. Okay. Or
Yes.
because a lot of people who know me, I will read something like right now, I'm obsessed with radical candor. Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor, how to, you care enough about people to tell them the truth. So now that's my obsession. I'm
Yes.
talking about it all the time. There was something else, or a Harvard Business Review article about lateral agility, it was about silos, and now I'm obsessed with this. But when I look back at my history as a human being, there have been those moments where I've either listened to something or went to a conference and heard somebody speak about something that gave me the opportunity to look at my life through a very different set of lenses. And
Yes.
I
Right.
have some of those moments too, where it created a course correction, maybe, or, it just put
Mhm.
me on a
Mhm.
different path. And
Yes.
the key, I think, is to be open to it, to
Yes.
just, allow that to happen. But then you took action. A lot of us will have that aha moment, but then we get back and life gets in the way and we don't take action. So, all right, Daniel, tell us about your buckets. Tell us the action that you took after, hearing this. And yeah, I can't wait to hear this from you.
Yeah. Before I jump into those buckets, as you were talking, I want to share something. I think again, it's just another practical example. I took my wife and I and the kids went to see Inside Out
Yeah.
2 last week, and if you haven't seen it, it's a phenomenal movie, not
Right.
just for kids. And what I was struck in that movie about was this idea that we have emotions, and it's through experiencing those emotions that we formulate our core belief
Mm,
system. And it talks about this in the movie, the core belief system. And the whole point of the movie is to talk about how that core belief system can change and evolve over time, and how emotions help evolve it over time. And since that epiphany I had, that moment, I've had a lot of experiences, as I shared, that have kind of changed my thoughts. And so, but the important piece to this is the intention behind it, because we all have core beliefs, whether we want to agree or think about them or be intentional about them or not. And so I really encourage the audience to think about, well, what are my core beliefs? Because those will form your
mhm.
buckets. These are my buckets. Maybe your buckets might look a little different. You might prioritize your buckets a little differently. I think the most important thing is you have some organization to how you structure your life. You can prioritize them and you can be intentional about them, because in the end, that's what's going to make you the best person that you can
Right.
be, whether that's it with your family, whether that's with the community, or your purpose, your profession. So there's the buckets, right? We've got
Mhm.
yourself. For me, I'm a spiritual individual, so there's a huge component of that within the self bucket. But there might be people that are more agnostic and they're just more on the mindful um, stream of things. And so we can talk about the specifics that's in that bucket, but self is first. The second bucket's family. Family can be friends, family can be whoever those most immediate people around you that you go to, you trust. They're the phone call at 3 a.m. Those people that are that important. The third bucket is community. Community can be a whole host of things. That can be if you're involved in professional organizations, that's your community. You've got your neighborhood, right? Practically speaking, if you are on the spiritual side, maybe you go to church or you attend mass. So that's a community. And then you've got service or your profession. And I put those in order. I ranked those just now in order of priority. I believe personally, and I've learned over my time, the last 10 or 12 years, that if I don't intentionally focus on myself and how I do that, and we can
Mhm.
talk about practical ways of how to do that, then there's no way that I can be the person I need to be for my family.
Right.
And then you can continue to build that out. So, okay, I got myself, I got my family. But if I can't focus on my family and I'm stressed about my family and there's push and pull going on with my family, then I can't be as engaged as I need to be in community in my community. And then I believe all three of those kind of build us up to be the best we can be in the service or the purpose we have in our life and the profession that we're working in. I've been asked a lot, wow, you categorize your profession last. That's the least, and
Yeah.
it's true. I do. And I think that's a very important piece to be intentional about. And again, we can
Yeah.
talk about how you work through those and harmonize those all, but that's the high level, simple buckets, 4 buckets. Keep it simple so that you can think about how you can apply it in your
Well,
own
that's
life.
funny. You say keep it simple because I'm sure you could have, and some people might do this. You have buckets, but then you have sub buckets and maybe sub buckets for those sub buckets. It's so funny. With my
Yes.
team, we try to come up with these quarterly rocks. We call them big rocks. And, it's a well known phrase when you're looking at you got to do your big rocks first. So then here's what we did. And our intent was to not take on too many projects at the same time. Like you just can't get everything done that you
Yes.
think you can do. And every single quarter, we're
Yes.
like, we didn't get that done. So let's streamline it. We do like 3 or 4 big rocks. Well, then what ended up happening was we added little rocks, and then someone added
Yes.
pebbles, and then someone created sand, and then we ended up with a list of 27 things. So I bet because when you and I talked and you told me about your buckets, I wrote them down and I thought, okay, are these the buckets that resonate with me based on my core beliefs? And they were. And I started, though, coming up with some sub buckets. And I'm like, wait a minute here. So do people do that? Well, now, you did say self, your spirituality is important to you. So that's
Yeah.
kind of a sub
Yeah.
bucket. But maybe we can start with self. Like, what are some practical things that you do to make sure that you're taking care of yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. You make a great point, Renee. And, this model is agile and flexible. As I've said, it's growing. Um, it should be what the individual needs it to be. There's some people who, they are just really good at Excel sheets and creating project plans and need organization. First, some people, more like me, who we would call explorers, right? So if you think about Myers-Briggs, like I'm an explorer. So when I think about an explorer, what does that practically mean? It means, I can put something, say, I can tell Apple Maps, I need to go to Richmond, Virginia. I don't care how I get there, just get me to Richmond, Virginia. And as we're going, it's like, oh, there's a wreck. Take the off ramp, go off the highway, save 20 minutes. I don't have any problem with that. There's some people, nope, staying on. I have a plan and my details. So I think that the important piece of this is focus on the 4 buckets. And if you need more categorization underneath that to help you be intentional, go for it. Just make sure you're harmonizing it.
Right. And not
like that. That's
complicating it. I think
not
I
complicating
don't know what
it
is with some people, and I guess there are times I'm guilty of this, but not as often as others, that people like to complicate things. It's 4 buckets that are meaningful to you based on your core beliefs, and then you put some things in there that really help you to contribute to, okay, I'm taking care of myself. What does that look like for me? And so,
Yes.
Daniel, I'm curious what that looks like for you. So if you could give us just a couple of practical things that you do, and you already mentioned something, with the family about eating, together, but for yourself, what do you do to take care of yourself?
Yeah. So for myself, I go back to that Center for Creative Leadership course, and I think about some things that I think you would, Renee, call sub buckets. I think of my emotional state, my mental state, my physical state, and my social state. Like those are like categories that CCL would say you need to build resiliency in those, right? And I know like that word resiliency can be touchy these days.
People don't like it.
But the reality is, whether we like it or not, we have to have resiliency in these buckets. And so when I think about things like practically, what do I do for those buckets? So I exercise. I'm intentional about it. It's hard. I'm tired sometimes, and I know we all walk that one out, right? And there's times when I'll be honest, and I'll confess I'm not as good, but I do. I try to play basketball 2 days a week, full court, 5-on-5. I get like 2.5, 3.5, 4.5 miles in when I do that. And so I believe focusing physically, whether it's just taking walks, whether it's doing core exercises for 20 minutes a day, like you don't have to go like join a gym and be at the gym 5 days a week. There are little things that can be done to get you where you need to get physically. when I think about mental and emotional, some very practical things I do. I journal. So I journal a lot. For me, and maybe this is for all of those explorers out there, I have to get it out of my
Yeah.
brain. It's kind of stuck in my brain. And so when I get it out and I write, it makes sense. And so I do take the time intentionally to journal. Whether that's about a situation that might have happened at work or with my family or how I'm tying that to my spirituality, it all kind of connects. And I write music.
Yeah.
So I play guitar, I write music. It's kind of like my outlet, we'll call it. Drives my wife insane, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure she loves
No, right? I hear it in my head right now. I thought it was time to put the kids
it.
in
Like,
bed.
no, you're playing music.
And I'm like, oh, I got to get my outlet out and play the song I've been working on writing the last 2 weeks. So there's just some examples. There's
Yeah.
lots, that are out there for adults to practice when it comes to self. But the key point here is find what works for you. And this will be a recurring theme here. You have to be intentional.
You do. And
even if it doesn't feel good, you do it.
Perfect example. So I commit to going to our gym so many days a week. I love doing Zumba. I used to dance a lot, so I love Zumba. Well, last night, okay, so by the time this airs, just so you all know who are listening, I just came back from sort of a vacation. And you know what it's like when you disconnect and you come back and then you're like, oh my goodness, like an avalanche of things that I have to do. And the class that I take a strength training class from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. and then a Zumba from 7 to 8. And I had back-to-back meetings all day. And I even said to my husband, you know what? I need to get caught up on my email. I need to get caught up on all these things. And I was considering not going. And then I stopped myself and I thought, wait a minute. How am I going to show up better the next day if I stayed at home and checked email and answered email for 2 hours, or if I went to the gym and did something for myself? And, I went to the gym, and there have been times I'm like, I don't feel like going. And my husband will even remind me, he's like, every time you say that, when you come home from the gym, you're like, I'm so glad I went. It was such a great class. But being intentional about it. And I don't let other things get in the way, even though sometimes I'm like, I struggle, but I still make that commitment. And so I think the point.
You gotta push through the distractions.
You do.
There's just distractions everywhere, whether it's the arthritis in the knee,
like,
or the broken schedule from travel, whatever the distraction is. The email from work that came in at 5:30 p.m. that you think you have the pressure to answer before the sun goes down.
Exactly.
That's where this harmony piece is so important.
Yeah, and that's where I've gotten better. That once I set that intention, I am going, because I travel a lot. So when I'm home, I like to make sure that I get those classes in at the gym. Even though we live in Florida, we walk, every morning. Florida's flat. There's no incline. So my heart rate's not getting up there, when I'm walking, we have a path near our house. So that's why I like to go to the gym, and plus the strength training. But once I set that intention and I look at my week, I commit to it. I don't let anything else get in the way. And I think, to your point, it's because it's number one, cannot be a healthy leader and take care of your people if you're not healthy yourself. So let's talk about family. And you said friends are part of that.
Yeah. Friends, really close friends, right? The accountability partners we have in life. I think that they're so important, and you have to be intentional around that as well. So I mentioned, my family and I, my wife, my 2 children, believe it or not, we've been doing this for years and years and years. We're very intentional around eating dinner around the table without distractions. And we actually talk to each other. I know, go figure. And we will have conversations like, what was the best thing that happened today? What was a challenging thing that happened today? We've been doing this with our kids since they were like 3 and 4 years old. And so that's just important family time to be intentional around, again, and harmonize it. But like you, I travel, so I have to
Right.
be thoughtful about that piece. Um, and then there's the giving the time to your family. And I'll give you another good practical example because that's the kind of person I am. Uh, my son, my 8-year-old, is on a traveling soccer team, and so we harmonize a lot of time to him,
I'm sure.
especially in the
Mhm.
summer. Thankfully, that's now ended. But he got his evaluation recently, and the coach challenged him, work on your skills for 20 minutes a day. And so it's the last thing I wanted to do yesterday in 85-degree heat was to go out back after
Yeah.
dinner and work with my son for 20 minutes on the soccer skills. Um, but I had to be intentional because one, the coach challenged him, and I had a conversation with my son about that evaluation every day. And two, my son gave me the look, right? And I could still get the look and be like, I'm just too
Right.
tired. Right. But I really believe, and you mentioned it too, like once you just like get past that
Yep.
distraction, you just take that step, it actually becomes easy.
It does, because there's no
Or
decision
only
making. It's like you make the decision ahead of time and then you don't allow yourself to go back. It's like,
right.
I used to keep a little index card. So sometimes I have these index cards set up to remind me of things. And for a while I had just do it. Stop thinking about it. If you said you're going to do it, just do
Yeah.
it. And you feel better after you've
Yes.
done it. Same thing with soccer for 20 minutes. Just go out and do it.
You just get started. You just get
Yeah.
started. And that's the intention. Just take the first step. And that's actually from a book. I saw a keynote speaker. His name is escaping me right now, but he wrote a book on habits and forming
James
habits.
Clear? Yeah,
Yes,
Atomic
thank you.
Habits. We'll actually
Yes.
put that in the show notes.
Atomic habits. Yes. And so, he gives these talks and it's amazing. These Olympians, right? They didn't just like snap their
No.
finger and become Olympians, right? I love this talk he gives around the cycling
Me
team.
too.
And like they looked at every little
And the
thing.
pillows, right?
Right. The pillows, the inflation of the
Yes.
tires on their bike. Like so many different variables you can look at. And I really liked that the story he gave about going to work out. He's like, just form the habit. Take the first step.
Yeah.
Just drive there.
Right.
Don't even get out and do it. Just drive there. Drive there for a week if you have to. And I think that that's what we need to get good at, whether it's focusing on the bucket of yourself or focusing on your family or community, which we'll talk about in work. But we just have to take that initial
Yeah, he
step.
says just focus on getting 1% better.
1% better.
Yeah,
That's right.
You don't, we know New Year's resolutions don't work. You don't say,
Don't
I'm going
have
to
them.
start, working out 5 days a week, blah, blah. And you get 2 days in, you're like, heck with this, forget it. But if you can maybe just do one push-up. It's interesting.
Yep.
My daughters, I have 2 grown daughters, and then my husband and I, we've been doing these challenges each month. We pick a challenge. So the first month we did squats. So we start with 25 squats a day. Then we upped it, 5 more. I wanted to go to 50. They're like, no, that's too many, so we had to compromise. So we did that for a month, and then we did push-ups for a month. We incremental, increases. And
Yes.
this month we're doing crunches. But it's
Okay.
kind of funny because you get into the habit of it. Like, and then we text each other, done, are we done doing our, we met the challenge for the day, and you kind of make it fun. But we're not looking at becoming, bodybuilders, it's just getting into the habit of doing some form of exercise every single day, even if it's just 15 push-ups. Although 15 push-ups for me, I'm
Absolutely.
not good at push-ups, so it was a definite challenge for me. I can do crunches all day long, but push-ups, not so much.
And you bring up, Renee, a good point that I was going to bring up. There's nothing like a little competition to motivate you, right? And so, like my wife, speaking of the bucket of community, so you can tie these buckets together too. So like my wife will do step competitions with one of the neighbors, and they go walk around the neighborhood, sometimes together where they're relating, because that's really about community is about, and the family bucket's about relationship, being intentional around relationship. But then there's the competition, and they're always taking pictures and snapping it. And like, look, I'm at 20,000
Yes.
steps.
Oh my God. I've actually
Right.
seen people get up, say, oh my gosh, they're ahead. Because we used to be in a step competition with my mother. Okay. My mother, who's in her, late 70s. Well, she had nothing better to do all day. So she would walk around her neighborhood all day long, and she won the competition almost all the time but we let her, we let her.
The competitor in me would say, move from steps to calorie burned.
Oh, that's a good one. See that? All right. I'll have to revisit that with mom. Okay. All right. So you
Yeah,
mentioned
yeah, yeah.
community, and community can
Yes,
also be like your physical community, but can also be, say, your professional, nursing organization. So talk
yes,
to us a little bit more
yes.
about community, especially from the nursing, if you work in healthcare perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, community at the local level,
Mhm.
of course, is your friends, your neighborhood. I also, for example, one of the two basketball sessions I do per week, I actually facilitate it in partnership with the
Mm.
local rec department for the city. It's supposed to be for 35-year and older males, but sometimes they bring their 18-year
Oh
old
gosh, yeah.
sons. Uh, but that's fun, right? So that again, how the buckets, like, I'm giving back to the community. I'm serving and giving back to the community, not just participant in it. And I think that's important. I get a lot of joy out of that and seeing the guys be able to play. I attend church and have men's groups and things like that. So those are ways to relate within the
Mhm.
community, right? Important. But that doesn't stop locally. We've got our own professional organizations that we're a part of. And I mean, not knocking professional organizations, they're important. They set very good position statements, and they provide lots of resources to us as leaders and as just nurses in general. Um, Yet, it's so interesting when you come together as a community of that organization and the energy that's
Mhm.
created. And I truly believe that it's about face-to-face interaction and relationship.
Absolutely.
Like, I can't get past the networking and how important
Mhm.
that is. And whether somebody believes in the Bible or not, and like, we can put that aside. It's still a book.
Right.
And during COVID, I was reading this book, and it fascinated me, something that Paul wrote in one of the the books of the Bible. He said, in one of the first chapters of one of the New Testament books, he says, I would love to continue to write to you in pen and paper. However, I long for the day that I can see you face to
Mm.
face, because I know the joy that it
Yep.
brings. 2,000 years ago, a man wrote that sitting in a prison
Yep.
cell, historically speaking, and he knew the importance of face to face interaction. And so that's really what
Mhm.
community is about. It's about face to face interaction, relating with your community, and not just taking
Right.
from it, giving to it as well.
Wow. That makes me think of all sorts of things, the importance of being with people. And we can get into a whole other conversation about whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, where do you get your energy?
Mhm.
You mentioned Myers-Briggs earlier, because I have my two daughters. One is an extreme extrovert. She needs to be around people. And the other one, after being around people, she has to go home and she calls it go into her dryer, shut the door, like with the clothes that you forget about, for a period of time.
Yes.
But I think as human beings, there is something innately the same in all of us, is that we need that human connection. Like, we're born as individuals, but we survive and thrive as groups, as, teams, as
Yes.
being with other people. And I don't think any of us realized the importance of that as much as we did when we were forced to not be with each other. Because I have
Yes.
never seen more positive energy in a room full of people than like one of the first live conferences that I attended after the world shut down. Bringing
Yeah.
people together, oh my gosh, it was like it was like Christmas morning for a kid. It was the greatest gift, is just to be with people. And I actually wrote something about this not too long ago. Now that everybody's so used to Zoom and Teams and having these meetings virtually, even though now that we can still meet in person, people are still opting to just hop on their computer and meet. And I said, make the
Yes.
effort, go to the meeting, be there in the same room with other human beings. It's a different experience than just hopping on, virtual.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. So
Yeah.
well stated.
Yeah. And I think the giving back, I want to emphasize the giving back, whether it's professional organization like AONL or ANA or whatever your specialty organization might be, or even in like giving back to Habitat for Humanity, for example. Like I really believe all of my heart that there is joy to be found when you're giving instead of receiving. And so I really encourage, when you think about the buckets and the harmonization, you get to that community bucket, think about, where can I go serve somebody else?
Yeah, and there's a lot of science behind this too, that the positive benefits, the serotonin and oxytocin and all those hormones,
Yeah, the dopamine happy juice.
you get just as much as the giver, if not more than the person receiving. And we often don't stop. I think we don't give ourselves the white space to pause and say, okay, how can I serve? Who can I serve? Whether it's yourself, okay, whether it's someone in your family, it's somebody at work, it's someone in your community, because even myself, I struggle trying to harmonize my buckets. And, I have my own business and it's growing, and trying to keep up with those demands. But yet my oldest daughter has 2 little kids, and she doesn't live near us, and she needs help. Okay. So she and her husband, they both work, they've got the 2 kids, not as much support where they live, when I was young, I had my nanny and my aunties, and everybody was around to help. And so she's apart from her family. So there are times where we go and help her. We'll go there for a week. Like, we're going next week.
Yeah.
Even though I'm like, how do I carve out this time? Because I've got a business I need to run. But that's an important bucket of mine, is to serve my daughter and to get to play with my grandkids.
Yes.
So that they're going to be 3 and 6 in the next month or so. But it's intentional, as you said, Daniel. It's intentional, and that means that week I'm not going to be able to work in my service bucket as much, because
That's
I'm
right.
focused on my family bucket. Yeah,
That's
and I won't
right.
get to the gym, but there'll be other things that I can do. Run around with 2 little kids. you can work up quite a sweat.
Right. But you could be in the best physical shape of your life, but emotionally and mentally not be in a good place. And so that's why the harmonizing and putting your energy into those buckets intentionally is so important.
No, it's so true. So true. All right. As we start to sort of wrap up, you have a leader who's listening right now who says, oh my gosh, this is resonating with me, because I feel that I have no harmony in my life right now, that I don't even know what my buckets are. So if somebody wanted to start, they were fresh, they had no buckets listed. I mean, certainly they can adopt yours, because that's what I did. When you told me, like, okay, I'm going to have a self bucket, I'm going to have a family and friends bucket. And I did that. And then I morphed it a little bit to really align with my core beliefs. And so, of course, I had some sub buckets in there too. But what would you recommend that they do to begin?
Yeah. I would say sit down and just be intentional. Grab a piece of paper and a pen, and just start writing. It's all about, we've talked about this already, taking that first step. And if anyone out there says, I don't need a model, I'm perfectly fine, I would really challenge that. I think we're all challenged in different ways, and being able to have the right intention and the right expectations is the starting point. And so don't be afraid to take the first step. Don't be distracted by taking the first step, and just take, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Give yourself 15 minutes. That's all the ask, I would say, is to start and see where your mind takes you and see where your heart takes you. And, start with the 4 buckets of self and family and community and service or your work profession, and to see what you start writing, see what
Yeah.
comes out, and maybe you'll morph it. That's totally fine. This is all about making the listeners be intentional about how they can be better so that they can be better in all the buckets. Because ultimately, if you get to that fourth bucket, and for us as nurse leaders, it's about being the best nurse leader we can be. And that's about giving and receiving, right? And there's moments to do all of that. So that would be my encouragement on where to
So
start.
I'm thinking about that nurse leader who might feel that right now their service bucket is all consuming.
Yes.
And we talk a lot about setting boundaries as a leader, especially when it comes to ending their day. Daniel, I'll never forget when I was working as a nurse manager. I had put in so many hours. You're salaried. It's not like I swipe in and swipe out. So I started
That's
tracking. I
right.
was putting in 50, 60 hours a week. And that was sometimes
Mm.
at my house doing that's where I did all my performance evaluations. They used to be on paper back in the day. That's where I would do them all. And I remember the one time my daughter had a softball game and I had missed enough softball games that I was going to leave early, quote unquote, early. And I'll never forget walking out. It was, I think, 3:30. And one of my nurses said, "Must be nice leaving early." It was all I could do not to strangle her. I was like, oh, and I felt I got really defensive and I stopped myself from defending
Yes.
myself. And,
Mm.
I wish I could go back and I'm curious your thoughts on this. If you want to start really harmonizing and you realize that all of your time, emotional, mental, energy, everything is spent in that service bucket, to let your team know that you're working on this and saying, it's important for me that I'm home for my family, that we eat dinner together as a family. So that means I'm going to be leaving every day at this time. To kind of let people know ahead of time, like I am working on this, because I think then it role models that it's important that it's not just work, that you're a human being, you have family, you have friends, you have your community, but to let people know that. What are your thoughts on that? Is to let people know ahead of time what some of your buckets are, maybe, or what's important to you. You don't have to say these are all of my buckets and some buckets, that's how I do everything, but at least to say I'm
Yes.
leaving or this is what I'm doing because.
Yeah. I have several thoughts and I'll make them quick. The first one is that individual was just a distraction.
Yes. Was.
Right. And I think we need to be intentional even about catching the distractions in our
Yeah.
mind. Because the reality is your story is not their story and their story is not your story. And there's always more information out there, and we're all making up these stories. We could all be producers and write amazing movies for Hollywood. Right? We
That
all
is
know
so
it.
true.
So I just want to call that out. The second thing I would say is, yes, you should organize it. You should tell
Okay.
people, and I would even go as far to say, have your board of directors who are like checking in on you and saying, hey, how's that harmonization going? Did you get to the softball game? Did you get to Friday night lights with your family? Whatever you've kind of set up. And the third thing I would say is be the role model,
Yeah.
so that your own staff, right, see it, live it, and maybe they start thinking about it themselves. And because we need our staff to be the best they can be. And let's just be honest, healthcare is a very challenging place to be working right now.
Yep.
It's very hard. And it's not just because the healthcare environment's hard. It's because the world we live in is very challenging, and there's lots of forces coming at all
Lots
of
of
us all the time.
distractions.
Lots of distractions, lots of just negative energy all over the place. I mean, just watch the news
Exactly.
or don't. So maybe that's a part of your
Yes.
intentional list.
Yeah. This is so great. I wish we had another 20 hours to talk about this, because as I said, when you and I first had this conversation, it really prompted me to sit down and really think about how I'm spending my time and who I'm giving my time to. And am
Yes.
I being intentional about it? Because we each only have so much time and in the day, in the week, and in our lives. So how do we want to spend that time? And really considering the whole emotional states and how our emotions actually drive us based on, again, our core beliefs. And I never even saw the first movie that you mentioned, the second one now.
Inside
Inside
Out.
Out. Yes. I haven't even watched the first one. So, okay, I'm going to have to put that on my list to watch the first one and the second one because I've heard they're really great. So I'm going to definitely do that. And those of you who are listening, I would highly encourage you to really give yourself some space and time, as Daniel
Mhm.
said, and just sit without any distractions and really think about your core beliefs and come up with your own buckets. But if you want to start with Daniel's, that's exactly what I did. Then start with Daniel's because they're pretty good. Okay. Self, family and friends, and community and service. I think it's a great starting place for you. So I hope this was really helpful for all of you who are listening today to help you to be a healthier leader so that you can actually lead your teams because it really does start with you. And Daniel, I want to thank you for being a guest on our show. This was such a great conversation. I was looking forward to it because I am absolutely, yes, I address workplace bullying and incivility, and that's my passion. It comes from a place of one of my top three core values is kindness, one human to another human. So
Yes.
when I see cruelty, it drives me crazy. I have to do something about it. And that's why one of the reasons why I do this work. But I'm also all about how do I become a better leader? How do I become a better human being, a better friend, a better,
Mhm.
person of service? How do I take care of myself better? And I think we all are in the same situation where we're just trying to become better. And this was a really great model, great framework for us to then copy from you and implement it. Thank you for being here. This has been great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my pleasure, Renee. And that's my hope that somebody can just, even if one listener takes a nugget from this and it makes a difference and they have their own light bulb, well, then we've
We
accomplished something.
have, and I have no doubt that somebody listening right now, this is going to be their aha moment that they're going to talk about on somebody else's podcast 20 years from now and say, 20 years ago, I was listening to the Coffee Break podcast. Okay. So, Daniel, if people want to connect with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, I have an active on LinkedIn, and so you can go search me up on LinkedIn. I accept everybody that wants to follow me, probably even the
Oh,
robots. And so that's out there. And so let's start with that. If there's individuals who want to go deeper, I'm happy to even connect individually with people, and we can start through LinkedIn and maybe exchange personal emails, things
that's
like that.
awesome.
So always available. Talk about this work and help people navigate
Yeah,
life.
it's such great work. So thank you for your generosity. And we'll have the link to Daniel's LinkedIn profile in the show notes, along with Atomic Habits and anything else that we talked about on the show today. So I want to thank you for listeners who are on the recording, either video or you're listening on the audio. Thank you so much for being here, for doing your part to cultivate a healthy work culture by first being a healthier leader. So thanks everyone for being here. Don't forget to rate, review, and to share this podcast with others. Take care, everyone. Bye.